In a saga veiled in mystery and deception, Ari Squire stands as a figure shrouded in dark intrigue. In the year 2008, Illinois witnessed a chilling plot straight from the pages of a noir thriller. Squire, driven by a desire to rewrite his destiny, embarked on a sinister plan to murder a friend and steal his identity, crafting an elaborate illusion of his own demise. The stage was set in Squire's garage, where he executed his grim plan, swapping clothes and wallets with his victim to create the perfect decoy. His macabre performance saw the innocent victim's body set ablaze, a ploy to mislead authorities and his own family into believing it was Squire who perished in a tragic accident. But the plot thickened when the real Squire, assuming his new guise, fled to Missouri, believing he had outwitted the world. However, fate had other plans. The unraveling began with a missing persons report, leading to the shocking revelation that the burned body was not Squire. As the law closed in, Squire, cornered by his own deceitful web, chose a tragic exit, ending his life and with it, his twisted masquerade. Thus, the tale of Ari Squire remains a haunting reminder of the lengths to which desperation and deceit can drive a person, turning an ordinary life into a narrative of suspense, betrayal, and ultimate tragedy. Brace yourselves, for this tale only spirals deeper into the abyss of human deception. As we peel back the layers of Ari Squire's macabre plot, each revelation is more astonishing than the last. Stay tuned, for what unfolds is not just a story of crime and identity theft, but a labyrinthine journey into the darkest corners of the human psyche. You won't believe the twists and turns this story takes, each chapter unfolding like a page from a psychological thriller. This is a narrative that defies belief, yet demands to be heard. Prepare to be captivated as we dive into a saga that blurs the lines between reality and the most daring fiction. The early years. Ari Squire's story, like many that culminate in tragedy, began in a seemingly ordinary world. He was a man who, at one point, embodied the essence of the American dream. At the age of 39, Squire was not just any man in the neighborhood. He was the owner and operator of a successful construction firm, a testament to his skills and business acumen. His life, on the surface, mirrored that of any prosperous entrepreneur. With a beautiful home, a family, and a business, Ari Squire appeared to have it all. Yet, beneath this facade of success and stability, there were undercurrents of turmoil and financial strains beginning to surface. The downward spiral. As a respected owner of a successful construction firm, Squire's life was one many envied. However, unknown to those on the outside, his world was precariously balanced on a bedrock of financial instability and deceit. The first signs of trouble emerged in the mid-2000s when Squire found himself embroiled in fraud cases related to Medicare. The resolution of these cases drained his resources significantly, with over $198,000 required to close them and an additional $200,000 in legal fees. This financial hemorrhaging marked the beginning of a downward spiral that would eventually lead to his infamy. But Squire's problems were not just monetary. Behind the closed doors of his beautiful home, personal turmoil simmered. The stress of maintaining a facade of success and normalcy amidst mounting debts likely took a heavy emotional toll. The pressures of financial woes are known to strain even the strongest of relationships, and it is reasonable to speculate that Squire's personal life was no exception. The exact nature of his private struggles remains largely unknown, yet it's plausible to imagine that the stress affected his mental state and decision-making. It was in this turbulent period that Squire's life began to deviate from that of a typical businessman. As his financial empire crumbled, desperation set in. The once reputable business owner faced a reality far removed from the prosperous image he had maintained. This dichotomy between public perception and private reality created a cognitive dissonance that would prove catastrophic. As Squire grappled with his crumbling empire, he began to concoct a plan to escape his predicaments. This plan, born out of a confluence of desperation and opportunity, would soon escalate into one of the most audacious and chilling plots in recent memory. It was a scheme that would not only shock the community, but also leave an indelible mark on the fabric of American crime history. The plan. Facing an overwhelming burden of debt and legal troubles, Squire's mind turned to extreme measures. He needed a way out, a radical solution to his insurmountable problems. It was during this time of intense pressure that the seed of a nefarious idea was planted, a plan to fake his own death and start anew, unencumbered by the financial shackles that bound him. Squire's scheme was not born overnight. It was a calculated and carefully crafted plan. He understood that for his plot to succeed, it had to be believable. He had to create a scenario so convincing that no one would question its veracity. This required meticulous planning and attention to detail. Squire knew that the key to pulling off his deceit was to leave no stone unturned in creating the perfect illusion of his demise. Squire's motives were clear: to escape his failing life and start over with a clean slate. However, the execution of such a plan required cold calculation and a disregard for human life. As he laid the groundwork for his scheme, Squire demonstrated a chilling level of cunning and manipulation. The early stages of his plan involved creating a believable scenario for his death. Squire meticulously planned the details of the staged accident. He would need to create a scene so tragic and so convincing that it would divert any suspicion from the truth. Every element of the accident, from the location to the method of his supposed death, was carefully thought out. As the plan took shape, Squire's dual life became more pronounced. On the surface, he maintained the appearance of a man struggling to keep his business afloat. In the shadows, however, he was a man orchestrating his own disappearance. This duality added an additional layer of complexity to his daily life, as he juggled the realities of his financial ruin with the planning of his fraudulent death. The ill-fated friendship. Ari Squire's heinous plan required a victim, a role tragically filled by Justin Newman, an unsuspecting young man who became ensnared in Squire's deadly web. The relationship between Squire and Newman, which culminated in one of the most macabre episodes of deception and murder, was a key element in the orchestration of Squire's plot. Justin Newman, a young man in his early 20s, encountered Squire under the guise of employment. Newman, like any young individual looking to make a living, saw in Squire an opportunity for work and growth. He was unaware, however, that he was walking into a meticulously laid trap by a man whose intentions were far from benevolent. Squire, on the other hand, saw Newman not as a human being, but as a means to an end. To Squire, Newman was the perfect candidate for his ruse, young, relatively unconnected, and most importantly, similar enough in appearance to Squire himself to be convincing in the role of a deceased Squire. Newman's naivety and trust in Squire would ultimately lead to his tragic fate. The dynamics of their relationship played a crucial role in Squire's plan. Squire had to gain Newman's trust to ensure that he could manipulate him into the circumstances necessary for the plot. This manipulation likely involved a facade of mentorship and camaraderie, luring Newman into a false sense of security. The exact nature of their interactions remains largely speculative, but it is clear that Squire's intentions were always sinister. As their ill-fated relationship progressed, Squire began to set the stage for the final act of his plan. He needed to ensure that Newman would be in the right place at the right time, under the right circumstances. This required a careful balancing act, keeping Newman close, yet not so close as to reveal the true nature of their association or Squire's ultimate intentions. The day of the deception. February 23, 2008, dawned like any other day for most, but for Ari Squire and Justin Newman, it would be anything but ordinary. Newman, under the impression of a regular day at work, arrived at Squire's garage, unaware of the harrowing fate that awaited him. There, amidst the mundane surroundings of tools and equipment, Squire executed his gruesome plan. Once this part of his plan was completed, Squire set about enacting the second phase of his plan, the staging of the accident. This part of the plan was crucial. It needed to be convincing enough to divert any suspicion from the truth of Newman's murder. Squire had chosen to stage a fire, a destructive force that would obliterate evidence and create the illusion of an accidental death. Squire then meticulously arranged the scene. He dressed Newman's lifeless body in his own clothes, creating a doppelganger of himself. In a grotesque twist, he also swapped their wallets, furthering the illusion that it was Squire who lay dead. With the scene set, Squire ignited the fire, setting ablaze the garage in a fiery inferno. The flames consumed the garage, with Newman's body inside, believed to be that of Squire. As the fire raged, Squire, now a fugitive from his own life, made his escape. He had planned every detail, including his route, his disguise, and his new identity. The fire, meant to be the pyre of his old life, was the beacon of his new, deceitful existence. However, Squire's plan, though executed with chilling precision, was not foolproof. The aftermath. In the aftermath of his heinous act, Ari Squire embarked on the next phase of his meticulously plotted escapade, assuming a new identity. This phase was as critical as the murder and the staging of the accident, for it was his gateway to a new life, one devoid of the debts and legal troubles that had ensnared his former self. The transformation into a new identity required careful planning and execution, and the assumption of Newman's identity required more than superficial changes. It demanded a complete overhaul of Squire's appearance and lifestyle. Squire's first step in his new life was to alter his appearance to match Newman's as closely as possible. This involved changing his hairstyle, his manner of dress, and even his mannerisms. He would have studied Newman's behavior, speech patterns, and habits to convincingly pass off as him in public. This process of transformation was not just physical, but psychological, as Squire had to immerse himself in the role of another person entirely. With his new identity in place, Squire faced the logistical challenges of living as Justin Newman. He needed to create a plausible backstory for Newman's sudden disappearance from his known life and emergence in a new location. Squire had to navigate through everyday interactions without arousing suspicion, which meant familiarizing himself with Newman's background, his relationships, and his history. Moreover, Squire had to manage the practical aspects of living under a new identity, such as acquiring new documents, opening bank accounts, and perhaps even securing employment. This would have required a high level of forgery skills and a deep understanding of legal and bureaucratic processes. Each step was fraught with risk, as a single mistake could unravel his entire scheme. Squire had to constantly watch over his shoulder, wary of law enforcement and anyone from Newman's past who might recognize that he was an imposter. The reveal. The investigation into Ari Squire's elaborate ruse unfolded with the intensity and complexity of a high-stakes detective novel. The authorities, initially led to believe that Squire had perished in a tragic accident, were soon to unravel a web of deceit that defied imagination. The first thread of suspicion emerged from the forensic analysis of the fire. Experts found inconsistencies in the scene that contradicted the narrative of an accidental death. The positioning of the body, the nature of the burns, and the fire's origin point raised questions that the initial explanation could not answer. These forensic discrepancies were the first cracks in Squire's carefully constructed facade. Simultaneously, an investigation into Squire's financial background added another layer of suspicion. Investigators uncovered his recent financial troubles and the substantial life insurance policy on his life. This discovery painted a new picture of potential motive and premeditation, steering the investigation towards a more sinister conclusion. As the police delved deeper, they started to trace Squire's movements leading up to the day of the fire. Surveillance footage, financial transactions, and witness testimonies began to form a trail that contradicted the notion of Squire's death. Every new piece of evidence added weight to the growing belief among the investigators that they were dealing with a case of fraud and deception, not a simple accident. The turning point in the investigation came with the identification of the body. Advanced forensic techniques, including dental records and DNA analysis, revealed the shocking truth. The body in the fire was not Ari Squire, but Justin Newman. This revelation sent shockwaves through both the investigation team and the families involved. For Newman's family, the news was a devastating blow. Their grief over his disappearance turned into horror as they learned of his tragic and senseless murder. The realization that their loved one had been the victim of such a callous and calculated plot was both heartbreaking and infuriating. On the other side, Squire's family grappled with a complex mix of emotions. The initial relief at learning Squire was potentially still alive quickly turned to confusion and then to a profound sense of betrayal. The man they had mourned, the person they thought they had lost to a tragic accident, was now the architect of a heinous crime. The family had to reconcile the image of the man they knew with the reality of his actions, a process fraught with emotional turmoil and disbelief. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Squire had meticulously planned every aspect of his disappearance. However, his plan had not accounted for the tenacity and expertise of the investigators. Piece by piece, they dismantled his elaborate scheme, exposing the full extent of his deceit. The final act. After living under the guise of Justin Newman, Squire's elaborate deception was finally exposed, leading him to a desperate, final decision. As the investigation unraveled his plot, Squire, now aware of his imminent capture, grappled with the reality of his actions and their irreversible consequences. The man who once confidently orchestrated one of the most audacious frauds was now cornered by the truth he had so desperately tried to escape. Squire's psychological state during these final moments was undoubtedly one of immense pressure and turmoil. The prospect of facing his crimes, the inevitable imprisonment, and the public humiliation was a burden too heavy to bear. In these last moments, Squire found himself in a motel room in Missouri, far from the life he once knew. The motel room, a stark contrast to his previous existence, was the beginning of the end. There, in the silence of his room, Squire was forced to confront the reality of his unraveling life. He had transformed from a successful businessman to a fugitive, and now to a man on the brink of collapse. Then, he made the decision to end his life. Likely, this was driven by a multitude of factors: fear, guilt, and a profound sense of entrapment. Squire, who had once felt in control of his destiny, was now trapped in a narrative of his own making, one with an inescapable conclusion. Taking his own life sent shockwaves through the community, his family, and the family of Justin Newman. For Squire's family, the revelation of his death, this time real, was a complex amalgamation of grief, confusion, and unresolved anger. They had to process the loss of a loved one not once, but twice, and under circumstances that were almost unimaginable. For Newman's family, Squire's death was a bittersweet closure. While it brought an end to the man responsible for their son's untimely death, it also meant that they would never see him face justice in court. The opportunity for answers, for confrontation, and for some form of closure through the legal system was forever lost. Ari Squire, formerly a respected business owner, was consumed by the enormity of his actions and the impending certainty of being caught. Tragically, he chose to take his own life, further complicating the already intricate tapestry of deceit and falsehoods. Join the conversation. Drop a comment to share your thoughts and insights. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating content. Thanks for tuning in to Really Unreal. Join us tomorrow as we delve into the case of the balloon boy. Would his family face the consequences for their elaborate scheme? Stay curious, stay connected,